2020 October-November exam. If we look at what the texts are about, we've got text A, which is about space travel. Text B is about the human swan, and text C is an incredible journey. So we see, it's 2 hours. I said 2 hours 15, but that's the AS exam is 2 hours 15. So you're given 2 hours, and you need to complete this exam within 2 hours. If you have some kind of concession because of ADHD or dyslexia, that might be extended, but the standard is 2 hours. Okay.
So they don't offer overtime or anything?
They don't offer overtime unless you apply for it. But in order to apply, you have to go to an educational psychologist, and the educational psychologist has to basically agree that you should get extra time. And then that information will be given to your exam center, and then your exam center will apply to Cambridge for you to have the concessions, whatever those concessions might be. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So I hope you guys have like drinks, or like something to drink and something to eat and snack on. If you are stuck on any of these, if you do have any questions after the session, then you can send me a message, or you can email me. So let's go through this. Just give me a sec. Okay, so in terms of our structure, our paper is structured in a way, it basically requires you to read the text, okay? You're going to need to read your text first. So text A is the most important thing that you're going to need to note. And it's actually the first thing you need to do. So before you do anything else, you read your text A, okay? And then in your questions, what you're going to do is you're going to take note of your command word, okay? Your command verb at the start of each question. So here it says give. Here it says, using your own words, explain. So that's your command verb, okay? And we can highlight that or underline that. I would suggest you maybe underline that. It's faster. And that tells you what is actually expected of you. Does that make sense? So another thing you need to do after you have looked at your command verb is look at how many marks are required. Often when I mark students' exams, it might be a 3-mark question, and they might give like 1 point. You need to check how many marks is it worth. So how many marks it's worth tells you how detailed your response needs to be. Does that make sense? So now, some of these questions, in order to get, you can't get a half mark, okay? So in order to get the mark, for instance, this question 1A, it is only for 1 mark, but you have to give 2 answers, 2 examples, okay? So if you get one of those answers right and the other one wrong, you still don't get the mark. You have to get both answers right in order to get the mark. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does that apply to a question like B as well, where the answers were 2 marks?
Okay, so reflect humorously. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to get 1 mark for an explanation of reflect, and 1 mark for an explanation of humorously. Now, in your explanation of this, obviously you can't actually use reflect humorously in your explanation itself. Does that make sense?
So you can't use like examples.
You can use examples, but you can't use these specific words to explain these words.
I see.
So if I'm describing what reflect means, I can't use the word reflect to describe what reflect means.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So other answers might require you to include 3 things for 3 marks, and then you'll get 1 mark per correct point. And then lastly, the overly long questions are really not necessary. Okay, you don't have to write like overly long responses. Short and sweet is good. Cambridge is testing your reading skills in most cases. And they want a precise answer. So they want to know that sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so they want to know that you have really read the text. Okay. And they want to know that you have understood the text. So for those who are listening to the recording, you might want to pause the video and read the text. Okay? I am going to read it out loud now. So for those who are joining me now. So if we look at our text, it's called Space Travel. So that's the title of the text. Okay? So we've got this bit of a subtitle type of thing. Okay, that's okay, Rowan. So we've got this little subtitle type of thing. Humankind is becoming increasingly interested in space travel. This offers both challenges and rewards. So this gives us some kind of information about what the text is going to be about. Okay. 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind. Neil Armstrong's words, broadcast to the world as he stepped onto the moon in 1967, became a defining phrase of the 20th century. They marked the first time a human being stood on a world other than planet Earth. The desire to go to space is as old as humanity. Although the sun and moon were often characterized as gods by ancient civilizations, others saw them as places we might dream of visiting. Many writers use their imagination to step off the Earth, usually in order to reflect humorously on its inhabitants. Improbable narratives of trips to the moon include True History by Lucian of Samosata, 2nd century, and Edgar Allan Poe's The Unparalleled Adventure of One Hans Pfaall, 1835. Despite fictional excitement, many longed to learn the truth. By the start of the 20th century, technology was catching up with literary imagination, and a trip to the moon was no longer just a flight or fancy. However, since the last lunar landing in 1972, no missions beyond a low Earth orbit have included human life on board. In 1977, the Voyager probes were sent on exploration past the planets of the solar system, and out into deep space. More recently, robotic probes have landed on Mars, and even on a comet at the end of 2014. Humans, however, have been all but grounded. Spaceflight is prohibitively expensive. A round trip to Mars would cost billions of dollars and require humans to spend at least 8 months in space, probably a lot longer, depending on what technology was available. Although NASA has provided plans to begin safe human missions to Mars in the mid-2030s, human space travel may depend on private enterprise rather than government cash. Whether by public or private means, it seems the will is there for humans to have more than just a second-hand understanding of life on Mars. It is a daunting challenge, but so was flying to the moon in 1969. and how motivational it is too, that a human footstep on another world may well become the defining moment of the 21st century. So when we talk about probes, as mentioned, that is talking about spacecrafts with no humans on board. Okay. Was everyone able to process everything that was being said? Anyone have any questions about it? Anything? Okay, so let's go look at our questions. Okay. Our first question is, give 2 examples in the ways in which the sun and moon have been viewed according to paragraph 2. Okay? So the first thing we're going to look at is that it says give. Okay? So we need to provide it with 2 things. And we've got 1 mark. We're going to get 1 mark for it. So we just need to give, do you guys think we're going to need to give explicit ideas or implicit ideas? So are the ideas that we're going to be giving contained in the text, explicitly stated, or clearly stated, openly stated, or are we going to have to read between the lines? And the answer is that we're going to have it's clearly stated. Okay, so we're going to find that we might not remember the exact ideas, so what we're going to do is we're going to reread, or we're going to skim the text. So just note that the questions are going to be in the order of the text, okay? So you can assume that this is pretty much going to be at the top of the text. So the questions are going to take you through the text, and it's going to be in paragraph 2, right? So you're going to read paragraph 2, then you're going to go a little bit further. This is paragraph 4, and you're just going to skim through it. Okay. Now, I have taught you guys how to skim, and you should be quite comfortable on how to skim. But if you're not, you can send me a message and we can talk about it. Okay. So what we're going to do is, for this question, paragraph 2 is quite short. Okay. So the desire to go to space is as old as humanity, although the sun and moon were often characterized as gods by ancient civilizations. Others saw them as places we might dream of visiting. So we want 2 examples of the ways in which the sun and moon have been viewed. Okay? So, they were viewed as gods by ancient civilizations, and others saw them as places we might dream of visiting. Okay. So hopefully you were able to identify that before I pointed out the answers. Now, each of these is not going to get its own mark. If you get both answers right, you're going to get 1 mark. Now let's look at question B. Okay. Now,
I have a question.
yes.
So, would we write it exactly as it says there, or would we write it in a sentence?
I think you would probably write it as a sentence. It's not essential. You're just giving 2 examples. But I would generally say write it as a sentence. Put it in your own words as far as possible. You don't necessarily have to put it in your own words for this question. But if you put it in your own words, you don't have to, gods by ancient civilizations is great at, put your own places we might dream of visiting, put your own words around it, but it's not super important to make it totally your own. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
So we're looking at B. So using your own words, explain what the text means by reflect humorously. Okay? Now here's where things get a little bit more difficult. So it's important that you approach, you take the correct approach. So if we look at our command word, it says explain. Okay? Now when we are required to explain something, does anyone know what that means? You can type it, say it, whatever.
Give information.
Yeah, give information, elaborate on what you're saying. But a very important part of this is it says using your own words. Okay, so it's important that you are using your own words. And I cannot stress this enough. If you do not use your own words, now using the word reflect or using the word humorously is not using your own words. You need to use your own words. So you're basically just paraphrasing it. So if you manage to get both of these strands correct, you're going to be able to get 4 easy marks. Okay, so we don't want to be throwing marks away. So in order to do this, you can simply explain both words in the phrase, and sometimes it might be easier to go to think of two similar words, like 2 synonyms for each word. A synonym for each word, and just basically provide those. And make sure that the synonym you're using is appropriate for the context. So it needs to still fit into the original context. So if we had to take the phrase reflect humorously out and we had to replace it with our own words, our own phrase, is it still meaning the same thing? So that's what you need to make sure of. And that is why they give you the line number, so that you can go check the context. You don't have to waste time looking for it. Your exam is, your line numbers are given. Okay, so you can just go look for that line and it's pretty easy. Okay. So if we go look there at line 8 to 9, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, many writers use their imagination to step off the earth, usually in order to reflect humorously on its inhabitants. Okay, does anyone have any ideas on what that might mean?
To think about something in a light-hearted way.
Yes, I think that that is quite accurate. So it's not going to be enough to say to think about something humorously. We might need to go a little bit more in depth, I think, and say something like to think in depth about something humorously, in a light-hearted way, because reflect and think don't necessarily mean the same thing. Do you know what I mean? So if I say I will reflect on that, and I say I will think about that, there is a difference in meaning. So we want to try and get it as close as possible. So we can't just say reflect reflect means think. We need to say think carefully, or contemplate, or consider something carefully. Does that make sense? So that would be the most accurate way, the most the best way to get our marks. Okay. And the obvious answer for the second strand, humorously, and I think light-hearted way is what you said. Another thing we could say is amusedly, probably not amusedly, amusingly. So that would be humorously. So talking about it you are capturing the idea by saying a light-hearted way, but humorously includes some kind of humor. And if I'm talking about something light-hearted, it just means that I'm not taking it necessarily seriously. Does that make sense? But there are various things that you could say. So we're going to say consider and humorously, we're going to put those two together. And we're just going to say consider amusingly. Okay. So that's going to be how I would replace it. Okay. And then in terms of improbable narratives, let's go look at line 9. Improbable narratives of trips to the moon include. Okay. So this is actually quite an easy question, but you either get it or you don't get it. Okay, that's cool, you can leave. So if we look at improbable, it means something that is unlikely to happen. It's not impossible that it would happen, but it is quite unlikely. Okay? So, in terms of improbable, I'm just going to say that improbable equals unlikely. And so narratives are like stories or tales. So I'm just going to say that narratives is like stories. So I would just say unlikely stories. So do you see, I don't have to have an overly verbose answer. I don't have to have this long answer. I can just have the basics. You know what I mean? The next thing we're looking at is question C. So it says reread paragraph 4. So it's giving us an instruction. We need to reread paragraph 4. So don't skip this instruction. Actually go reread paragraph 4. So let's quickly go do it. Wait, let's first go look what it's asking us for. Give 2 reasons why space travel became more likely in the 20th century. So in terms of what they're asking us, okay? Just give me a sec. I just lost my place in my notes. So we're supposed to be giving information, okay? So you can either quote here or you can change the wording slightly. That's up to you, but it's not asking you to provide an answer that's completely in your own words. That's going to be coming a little bit later on. So here you need to give 2 reasons why space travel is more likely in the 20th century. Okay? So we said paragraph 4, right? So paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. Despite fictional excitement, many longed to learn the truth. By the start of the 20th century, technology was catching up with literary imagination, and the trip to the moon was no longer just a flight of fancy. Okay, so if we look here, give 2 reasons why space travel became more likely in the 20th century. So if we look at this, so technology was catching up with literary imagination. And then we've got a trip to the moon was no longer just a flight of fancy. And then we've also got this, many longed to learn the truth. Okay, now we've got 3 options there. What are we going to choose? Okay, do you guys have any thoughts on what you're going to choose?
I think the quote, many long to learn the truth, and then also the quote, technology was catching up with literary imagination, is better because they're more different. There's more differences between the 2 quotes.
Yes, good. So if you just say that the trip to the moon was no longer a flight of fancy, the reason the trip to the moon was no longer a flight of fancy was because technology was catching up. So this is because, this second point is because of this. So it would really just be you repeating the same thing repeating the same thing twice. And that's not what we're going for. Are you with me? Okay. So I think, so if you give those 2 things, then you will definitely get your 2 answers, and that will be more than sufficient. So you can either quote it directly or you can put it in your own words. Okay. The only problem with quoting is that you can only quote the relevant part. Now, if you end up quoting too much, then you don't get the marks, because that is a short paragraph. You might end up quoting just about the whole paragraph, and that's not going to give you the marks. So while quoting might be easy, you have to know what parts to quote. So I would suggest, if you're unsure, just put it in your own words. Okay, is that all good? So let's go on to D. Okay. So here we are being asked to reread paragraphs 5 and 6. And the first 2 strands shouldn't give too much confusion. So it says reread paragraph 5 and 6. However, since, and then ends the government crash, identify 2 reasons why probes have been an advantage to space exploration. Okay? Now, this question, is it expecting us to have implicit knowledge or explicit knowledge?
Explicit.
Okay, so it is asking explicit knowledge, but it's question D as a whole is also looking at, so I was actually asking about, I know I said I, but I meant D. So we were looking at, it looks at explicit and implicit knowledge, because we look at identify 2 reasons why probes have been an advantage to space exploration, and then why humans have not so far been to Mars. So we are looking both at implicit knowledge and explicit knowledge. I would be mostly explicit knowledge, but it might contain some implicit ideas for you to be able to understand fully what is going on. So let's quickly go read our paragraphs. That's paragraph 5, right? 5 and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, however, since the last lunar landing in 1972, no missions beyond a low Earth orbit have included human life on board. In 1977, the Voyager probes were sent on exploration past the planets of the solar system and out into deep space. More recently, robotic probes have landed on Mars. And even on a comet at the end of 2014, humans, however, have been all but grounded. Okay. Then, space flight is prohibitively expensive. So you see this would be more related to question 2. Well, question II. A round trip to Mars would cost billions of dollars and require humans to spend at least 8 months in space, probably a lot longer depending on what technology was available. Although NASA has provisional plans to begin safe human missions to Mars in the mid-2030s, human space travel may depend on private enterprise rather than government cash. Okay. So, if we look at those, can you identify what some of our answers might be? I'm going to give you a moment to identify, and then just identify for yourself. Okay, let's quickly look at this. So, identify 2 reasons why probes have been an advantage to space exploration. So these answers aren't necessarily directly in the text, but we can get them from the text. Okay? So we've got the Voyager probes were sent on exploration past the planets of the solar system and out into deep space. Okay? So what does that... Can we come to any conclusions around that?
Probes can be sent further. It's something that humans can't do at the moment.
Yes. So probes can go further, and then we've got this other one that I've identified. Space flight is prohibitively expensive. And so an implication here is that by using probes, it is indeed far cheaper than sending humans. And then obviously the exploration past the planets of the solar system and out into deep space, and that would be another advantage. So in terms of that, I would put down that it is cheaper than sending humans, because it is cheaper, as we've got there. And secondly, they can travel further out, okay, into space. Okay, so there, while it was primarily, the information was given in the text, it did require you to actually evaluate the information and come to some kind of conclusion about it. Does that make sense? So it didn't specifically say in the text, probes have an advantage to space exploration because. So it did require some thought. Then explain why humans have not so far been to Mars. Okay. So this question is for 3 marks. Okay. You are required to include 3 different things. Okay? So this question is not marked on a rubric. It is marked according to, did you provide 3 things? Okay? So you might want to use your own words. So you're going to want to use your own words, actually. And you're going to maybe develop your explanation. Although developing your explanation is not necessarily required of the question. I mean, you can write a mini paragraph. You can write like a whole piece, as some of you do. Like often you guys do that. And make sure that your ideas are in some way linked. Just make sure that you look at why humans have not so far been to Mars. And make sure that you understand that this is assessing your understanding of both explicit and implicit ideas. So one explicit idea that you're going to be looking at is an idea which is clearly stated in the text, and that is that humans so far have not been able to go to Mars. Okay? And they have not been able to do that because of how expensive a trip would be. Okay? Also, they would have to spend at least 8 months in space. Okay? Then let's look at an implicit idea. And that's one that's not clearly stated in the text. And obviously, if humans are spending 8 months in space, that's going to have some kind of implicit implication that there are going to be safety concerns. Does that make sense? So we could have had these three ideas, and linked them up in a paragraph. Okay. And when we're writing our paragraph, there's like a little mini paragraph here. We can say something like firstly, secondly, lastly. Now I just want to note here that some of you, when you use the words firstly, secondly, lastly, you use them incorrectly. You need to be using them to link ideas. If ideas are not linked, you cannot say firstly, secondly, lastly. Okay. Because then you are not elaborating, you are not giving your first point, then your second point, then your last point. So I would say, firstly, the trip would be quite expensive. Secondly, humans would have to spend a very long time in space, which could be over 8 months long. And lastly, this could lead to massive safety concerns because sending people to Mars, because we do not know the health implications of sending people to Mars. So that could be a perfectly fine sentence. So we have 3 points there. You with me? Okay.
So before you move on,
Yes.
with question DI,
Yeah.
could another implicit reason be that the same code, it would require humans to spend at least 8 months in space? That would mean that more preparation would be needed.
Well, we're asking ourselves what 2 advantages of probes are. Okay?
Okay.
So if we're looking at the 2 advantages of probes, you can't say it would require humans to spend more time in space. You can say something like, by practicing space travel using probes, we can learn about space so that we can improve our technology so that humans would spend less time in space to do it.
Okay.
Do you understand? Okay, then let's look at E. Okay, so again, we've got 3 marks, and it does require you to use your own words, okay? So you cannot do any lifting from the text. You cannot take anything from the text. Now make sure you don't, these are easy marks, do not lose these marks, okay? It's the last stranded question. And so what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to reread paragraph 7, and yeah, let's really go read paragraph 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, let me just read the question. Using your own words, explain why there is a good chance that humans will land on Mars in the 21st century. Whether by public or private means, it seems the will is there for humans to have more than just a second-hand understanding of life on Mars. Okay. So, the will. Okay? It is a daunting challenge, but so was flying to the moon. Okay? So, it is a daunting challenge, and how motivational it is that a human footstep on another world may well become the defining moment of the 21st century. So, our question is, explain why there is a good chance that humans will land on Mars in the 21st century. Okay, ideas. Anyone have ideas?
Each of the sentences gives a different idea.
Did I?
So,
Yeah? Okay, so what
So
we've
you
got
could-
here is this public or private means, right? So there is a will. So that means that someone's going to fund it. So I just wanted to get you started on that, just so that you have a direction to go. But yes, you were saying that each of them have a very different idea.
so that would be the approach. In the same way that you explained how we should answer question DII,
Mm-hmm.
you use the firstly, the secondly, and then the lastly. And you would have to put it into your own words.
Okay. So what are your points that you would use?
The fact that there is a will to get to Mars.
Would we be using implicit or explicit skills? Does it require us to read between the lines?
I think it requires both.
Okay. And obviously any point that we get from the text, we're going to have to infer meaning to it. Okay. So in our little mini paragraph that we're going to write, we're going to need to quote things and then explain those things. So we're not going to say that those things are us. We are going to say, as you said, the firstly, secondly, lastly. Okay? Those firstly, secondly, lastly are called discourse markers, by the way. So if we look at this, we're looking at this human footstep, like people are really into like being the first. So there's a strong desire for people to have the opportunity to have a first-hand experience of Mars, okay? So they want more than just a second-hand understanding of life on Mars, so that means that they want a first-hand experience, okay? And instead of saying there is a will, we can say something like there is a desire, right? And that would be putting it in our own words. Now, secondly, we have a lot of billionaires in the world, right? Well, not that many, but we've got a few. And so if we look at by public or private means, we can infer that there will hopefully, so secondly, there will probably be funding available to bring landing on the moon to being. Does that make sense? And then lastly, we can say that people are ready for a challenge. It is a daunting challenge, but so is flying to the moon. So it is a daunting challenge, but so is flying to the moon says that people are ready for this challenge. People are excited for this idea. And so we can say that people are ready for the challenge. After all, man has already landed on the moon. And if we look at these three things, they make sure we need to make sure that they are expressed in our own words, and that will give us our 3 marks. Okay. Any questions on that? Do you all agree? Okay. So, next up we've got our summary question. Now this is question 1F. Okay? Now, our summary question, many people hate this question. It is very difficult to get it 100% right. And you need to make sure that you are getting each of the core questions right. Okay, so it's for 15 marks. Okay, it is the highest mark we've seen in this exam so far. So if we look at these questions according to text B, what were the challenges that Sasha Dench experienced during her journey? Okay? So all we're looking for are the challenges. Now some papers might ask you 2 questions. This paper asks you only 1 question. Do you see that? Okay. Any questions before we start this? I think before we start this, let's maybe take a 5-minute break. I think we're going to have to do like a part 1 and then a part 2. But let's take a 5-minute break and then I will see you guys in a few minutes. Okay. So I will see you guys at 16 minutes past 12. Okay. Okay, let me just open this again. Okay, is everyone here? Okay, cool. I see Tato isn't here, but maybe she lost connection. Let me just go check. Okay. Where are we? I lost my place. I just need to have all these windows side by side so that I can see what you guys are saying. Sorry, I'll be with you now. Okay, there we go. Just Discord was not doing what I was telling it to. Okay, so when we look at our summary question, so the idea is that you really need to get the core questions right. There are many people who think that this is an easy question. And while none of the questions are particularly difficult, if you know the correct approach to this question, you will manage, okay? The thing is, there are a lot of things that you need to keep in mind for this question, okay? So, if you want a top band response, there are 15 marks available, and 10 marks are allocated to reading, where 5 marks are allocated to writing. So essentially what you need to do is you need to identify and select a range of ideas applicable to whatever the focus of the question is. Okay? So you need to find those ideas from the text, and you need to make sure that you have identified the correct ideas. So many of you many of my students miss out on the ideas, and they don't identify the correct ideas, and because they're not keeping focused on the question. So challenges, I can't remember the text, we'll read it now together, but challenges that Sasha Dench experienced during her journey. So it's not challenges that she experienced after her journey or before her journey, it's challenges that she experienced during her journey. And that is what we're going to stay focused on, okay? So successful summaries always show that there is evidence of clear planning, and you need to think carefully about what evidence you are going to use and the order in which you are going to include them. I would greatly, I don't know how to, I appeal to you to not approach this in a chronological way, okay? So you need to approach it you need a range of about 7 ideas. So more than 7 is absolutely fine, but at least 7 ideas need to be in your piece, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to read your text. You're going to highlight on your text what the points are that you are finding, okay? Then you are going to take your pen or your pencil and you are going to number each of those points in terms of how you are going to put them into your piece of writing, okay? And you are going to think about how different ideas can be grouped together, okay? So we're looking at how can we group things together, which ideas are related. So this is the only question that says you cannot write more than 120 words. So it's important that you organize your ideas and you think about how you're going to write your summary. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to include enough words, and you probably won't include enough ideas in your summary. Some of you might include a suboptimal amount of ideas in your summary and have these very long summaries because you are explaining things in the most lengthy way that it can be explained. So yeah, you don't want to go over the word count of the summary because the summary is all about writing concisely. So this question requires you to read text B, so make sure that you are reading the correct text. That's also a very important thing. It says there, you must use continuous writing, not note form, and use your own words as far as possible. Continuous writing does not mean that you can only use one paragraph. It just means that you are writing in like essay style or like paragraph style. You are not doing point form. That's what it means. And you have to use your own words. So there is no lifting from the text. If you lift from the text, you will be severely penalized. I like the summary task, this one in particular, because it's only asking you to summarize one thing. So you don't have to go on 2 different journeys. So you don't need to think about splitting the ideas between the 2 different strands. But we are going to have to find 7 or more ideas which link to this question. So let's read our question, okay? So we're looking for specifically challenges that Sasha Dench experienced during her journey, okay? I'm actually just going to open this here so that I can highlight. Okay. Oh wait, that's the wrong text. Okay, we'll highlight on this one. Okay. The British conservationist and human swan Sasha Dench travelled in a motorised paraglider as part of a 7,000 kilometre journey. She was following migrating Buick swans from Russia to Britain in order to better understand the reasons for their declining numbers. The whole way I've been trying to put myself in the head of a swan. There are times when I wish I was a swan. It would have been so much easier, reflected Dench. Okay, so we see, she says it would have been so much easier, so that tells us that it was challenging. When the temperatures got really cold, I wish I could flap my arms and generate some heat. So, temperatures got really cold. But that would make the whole paramotor shake. Okay? So that's not really relevant. We could say that she needs to keep the paramotor still, but maybe we'll come to that later. With her swan's eye view of the world, Dench said she particularly appreciated crossing the taiga forest of Russia, seeing no trace of human habitation, and witnessing the scale of the tundra. The colors of the tundra are the most beautiful I've ever seen in a landscape. They look as if they could be from Mars, she said. When she reached urbanization, she met Russian school children who were sent out to shoot migrating birds for food. They were riveted by how conservation and research works. They had no idea where the swans went. Okay, so maybe we could say something like the lack of education around it, but I don't know, that's like a long shot. I'm just coming up with ideas. Although she took care to avoid disturbing other migrating birds, there were moments when they joined her. When she flew up to 900 meters above the clouds, the sky was filled with geese. You really felt in the thick of migration, she said. At one point, 2 fronted geese veered towards her. I was just about to turn away, thinking there would be a collision, when they suddenly flew alongside my wingtips in a V formation. That was very special, she said. On another occasion, she flew 50 meters below a migrating flock of Buick swans. They drew right alongside me. I didn't look like a threat to them. I was just a big flying thing, and they had completely ignored me, she said. Okay, here, this is where I think it's going to come out. Low points included time spent in Russia, in a Russian hospital, for an MRI scan following a dislocated knee during takeoff. She also lost track of one of the satellite-tagged swans she was following during foul weather in Estonia. Dench realized it had perished. You get quite attached to them as individuals. Okay, so I can say, maybe we can say this is we could maybe say emotional toll of losing them. Do you guys agree? Although flying low over the taiga forest was particularly hazardous with its lack of safe landing spots. Okay, particularly hazardous with its lack of safe landing spots. Crossing the English Canal was Dench's toughest challenge. When I crossed from Belgium into France and first saw the white cliffs of Dover, I started to cry, she said. I'm not much of a softie, but I thought actually I am keen to be home. Okay, so we can also say she missed home. English Channel, I think, could also be a point. Let's quickly see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. But that is the bare minimum. Okay. Are there any others that you guys saw? Okay, let's see if I can find something in my notes. So remember, the question is asking us to identify any challenges that Sasha Dench faced. You're required to write 120 words. And for this, you are getting 10 reading marks. But the challenge is that writing 10 things and sticking to 120 words can be quite difficult. Okay? So when we look back at the past before these exams, so before 2020, we had to first write things in note form, and then we had to put them into paragraphs. Okay? So the more ideas we have, the harder it's going to be to include all of those ideas in a concise 120-word summary. So something I noted here was that it was a 7,000-kilometer journey. So let me just quickly highlight that. Okay. Okay. So ideas that I missed now when I was going through it. She was having challenges putting herself in the head of a swan. She needed to think the way swans thought. Okay? Then the whole paramotor shaking. Like, obviously you have to keep still the whole time. Okay? And that could be quite challenging, I think, right? So another thing we could notice is that she had to constantly be careful not to disturb the other migrating birds. Okay? Just give me a sec. Just looking for the place. Okay. So she went to a Russian hospital for an MRI. So this might not have been super easy, honestly. So, and then she got injured. Now, here, another thing that I noted here is you get attached to them as individuals, but I didn't notice that she realized that it had perished, and like, she's lost this thing now, like it's dead. Okay. So, if we look at this, let's create a Google Doc quickly. Just give me a sec. Okay, I've got my Google Doc open. So things we might have noticed, and you can do this on your own as we go, you can stop looking at what I'm doing, mute me or something, and try do this part on your own. But we've got a 7,000 kilometer journey. Now that is a notable journey. Okay. Second thing we've got is that the whole way I've been trying to put myself in the head of a swan. Okay. Then we've got temperature. It's got really cold. We've got the whole paramotor shakes. She met Russian school children who were sent out to shoot migrating birds for food. Now imagine this, you're tracking this migration, you've got people who you've put trackers on them, and then these kids come out and shoot the birds. We've got disturbing other migrating birds, so she had to be careful the whole time. Now do you see how each of these points, it's not an explicitly stated that it is a challenge that she's facing. But if we think about it, we can see, okay, this is definitely a challenge that she's facing. Does that make sense? So then she went to a Russian hospital for an MRI scan. She realized that the bird had perished. And you get quite attached to them. As individuals. Okay, are we all good at that? Okay. Oh, she had to take care not to. I didn't see that. Sorry, Kaya had another thing open over this. Yes, but you're right. She had to take care not to disturb the other birds here with the disturbing other migrating birds. So we've got all of these ideas. I'm just looking for my place. Okay, so let's really go through these. What can we say about each of these? So it's her long journey. So thinking like a swan is challenging. She had to do all this flimsy work with a flimsy motorized paraglider. So I don't know if you know what these are. It's like, let me just look for a paraglider quickly. This is what it looks like. Let's just look for motorized. This is what it looks like. So it's got like a thing that pushes you forward, and it's kind of like that. It's quite intense. Imagine going so far with that. Now 7,000 kilometers like to Cape Town is like 1,500 kilometers from Joburg. That is 7,000 kilometers is really far. Now she also felt compelled to stop and educate these Russian children who were shooting the birds. There was the time that she spent in a Russian hospital, and that is quite intense. It's being in a hospital in a country that's not your own. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. So I did highlight a couple more in the text. And I'm going to take these quotations that I've got here, and I'm going to look at how can I organize them. So as I said, you don't want to adopt a chronological approach to this. You don't want to start at the top and work your way through to the last quotation, because it's not quite the best way to do it. So if we look at this document that I've got here, I'm going to think of a good way to do this. In your exam, you're just going to highlight them, and I would suggest you just number them. Don't write them out like this because it's unnecessary. Okay? So I might start, I think I'll start here with the 7,000 kilometer journey. And I'm going to make that the first thing I say. So I'm going to put a number 1 by that, okay? Now, this whole paramotor shaking isn't such a big deal if it's just a short journey, but because it's such a long journey, I think we can link them, right? So I'm going to link these. I'm going to make them the same text color, purple. Okay. So I've linked those. Okay. Then I'm not really going to, I can talk about this. So I'm going to say here, I can talk about this, but my discussion around why it's okay, are you with me? Okay. So my second quotation that I'm going to use, what do you guys think I should use second? I think I can actually yeah?
I think you could use the fact that the temperatures got really cold next, because it does link to why the journey was so intense as well.
Okay, yes, okay. So we're going to use this second, and we're going to say that this is another reason that the journey length was so intense. Do you think we can like actually link them properly with the color? Okay, so I'm going off my note. I dropped my notes to go with how you guys want to do it. So let's go with how you guys want to do it. Okay, so what are we going to talk about next?
I think you could use second point next.
Okay, so we're going to use our second point next. So that's going to be our number 3. Okay. So do you see it's not like entirely not chronological. And then we can also here mention when we're talking about this idea, we can mention the flimsy work of the paramotor. Are you with me? And do you think we can make this number 4 maybe? So maybe we can make this whole thing like one paragraph actually. Because they're all kind of related, right? Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, now, what I would say here is this: get quite attached to them as individuals and realize that it had perished, Russian hospital for an MRI scan, and educating the Russian school children. I would say that this all kind of groups together quite well because it's kind of the emotional toll it took on her. You with me? Do you guys agree? Well, the emotional, the personal toll it took on her, the toll it took on her as a person, and this was just the task was difficult. So I would say disturbing other migrating birds would also fall into this first category. Do you guys agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in terms of this, I would say maybe we can make this 4, we'll make this one 5. And then if we look at these orange ones, where should we... I think it would be very impactful if we maybe spoke first about how we get attached to them as individuals, and then talking about this one that had perished. And then we talk about how the kids were shooting the birds, which is related to that idea, right? And then the Russian hospital we can make number 9, right? What do you guys think of that? Okay, so you would use the cold. 5 and 9 could be linked. 5 and 9 could be linked. Okay. Sorry, I wish I had like all the screens. Okay. So, there is our summary. Okay. I'm going to ask you guys to we won't get through the whole thing today. So what we're going to do is we're going to, for your assignment, I'm going to give you guys these points, and you guys can, or you can use your own points and you can create your, actually you can, I want you to create a summary, write your summary, okay? And then we will go through the summary tomorrow, okay? We will go through my example of the summary tomorrow, and you can compare yours to mine, okay? Is that all good?